would call to order at 6:31 the select board meeting, and this is a joint meeting of the select board, Southborough School Committee, Advisory Committee, and Capital Driven Planning Committee.
Call the Southborough School Committee meeting to order at 6:31. 4 out of 5 members are present.
I'll call the advisory meeting to order at 6:31. I think 5 out of the 7 are present. Am I right?
You have 2 online, so
2 online. Okay. So 7.
Howard and Andrew online.
Okay.
And then CIPC has a quorum, so 3 out of 5 are here, so I'll call CIPC to order as well.
Okay, great. So can everyone hear me okay? All right. So we thought we would structure the meeting, the room in this format so we can all kind of see each other rather than just in the like classroom rows. So there's one item with 3 subtopics on our agenda for tonight, which is continued discussion of NERI building project, and 3 subtopics under that: feasibility and schematic design options, date and location of a special town meeting, and the structure of warrant articles. So I'm just gonna, at the beginning of the meeting, kind of frame the issue, and for the people in the select board, this will be very repetitive because this is almost the same thing I said at the last meeting. But just as a background, and I think it's maybe more for the benefit of CIPC and advisory, but kind of how we've gotten here. We all know the background of the special town meeting vote earlier this spring about the proposed new 4-grade school at NERI. And we then had a joint meeting of the select board and the school committee on November 18th. And it was requested and hosted by the school committee. And there was a presentation by Superintendent Martineau about kind of the overall situation, where we were at. As you might recall, we created a pre-K through 8 building committee that Tim and Eric were on. I don't know if anyone else, Laura was on it too as well. And anyone else? Pierce was on it.
Steve Holland was on from Capital.
Okay,
just joined us as well.
And that committee researched, Tim could tell me, 12, 14, 13
of the actual options. Was it 7, Eric? Was it 7, right? 7 actual options with about 16 pieces per option. Yeah, something like that.
So the point I'm making is, of the different kind of permutations of projects you could do, there were a certain number where the school committee, the school district found that it was, I'm forgetting the term, educationally compatible or educationally feasible, something like that. So it's useful. We're starting to kind of narrow down options. And so at the meeting on the 18th of November, where was the school committee and the select board, we're looking to begin a discussion about moving forward with next steps on one or more of those different options. And specifically, that would be getting town meeting funding for feasibility and schematic design options, so that voters could know how much these options cost. And we talked about, should we focus on one of them? Should we present kind of a couple different options to town meeting? Ask town meeting if they want to study them, and then use that as a next step to his eventual vote on a project that could get the 2/3 support that will be necessary to move forward. 2 considerations that we talked about at that meeting were, one, the condition of the roof at NERI is in very bad shape and needs replacement urgently. And the school committee and Superintendent Martin can speak more about that. And Jason, on behalf of CIPC, made the good point that it is disruptive to have one huge capital project, which we continue to debate. Makes it harder to make decisions about what other capital projects to prioritize, unless we make a decision about the issue we're talking about here. So I think after we had the meeting on the 18th with the school committee and the select board, we've discussed this as a select board at our 2 most recent meetings on November 21st and December 2nd. We selected September, March 7th as a presumptive date for a special town meeting to consider this. And I know that Chelsea asked that we talk again about whether we should go forward on that date or another date. And I'm not intending that we're going to make a decision at the select board tonight about what the date would be, but hear input on it, and then maybe at our next meeting on the 16th, make a decision on that. But some of the options that I think we're really focused on in our last discussion were a renovation of Neary, adding 2 grades to Finn and closing Neary, moving 5th grade to Trotter and adding an additional grade to Finn, and relatedly, just doing a repair of Neary. We had Mark Robidoux, our building commissioner, come to our last select board meeting to talk about question of would a Neary roof repair trigger ADA and other codes, and I thought the takeaway was it doesn't necessarily. That there's a way it could be done if the price came in right, that it wouldn't necessarily trigger ADA, although you're getting into a zone where there's also a 3-year look back. So there's no guarantees that moving forward with the roof repair isn't going to trigger other codes soon after that. So in terms of, I think one of the goals, at least from the select board and perspective, is maybe to start to take some votes on this tonight with the input of school committee and CIPC and advisory. And how I think we should structure the discussion is we just hear from each board on what your thoughts are on this. That is, holding a special town meeting this spring, should we or shouldn't we? If we do that, should we ask for a town meeting to fund one option or more than one option? And then also get your thoughts on the special town meeting date and then how you would structure the warrant. Would it be just one warrant to fund X number of different options, or X number of warrant options corresponding to each option? Tim is the only person here in person for public comment, so I thought public comment's not on the agenda, but if people in the public are here and listen to this and want to offer input afterwards, would be happy to hear them. So I know I've heard from we've talked about this a lot. Maybe thinking of schools, do you want to begin and offer your kind of input on where you're at on the different options we discussed?
Sure. Does anybody want to go first? I think we should take the special town meeting, whether to do that in the spring first. Anybody want to start? I'll start. So I think the roof situation at Neary is it needs to be addressed as soon as possible. I think we continue to have classrooms that are leaking water. And I think to have our children having to go throughout the day smelling wet insulation and whatever else is coming through is just unacceptable at this point. So, and to expect our teachers to teach under those conditions, I don't think that's the community that we want to be at this point. So I think it's imperative that we have a special town meeting in the spring to figure out what the community's appetite is for moving forward with 1 to 3 options. I don't think we can wait any longer to do that. I think we really need to know what the community wants us to look at. So that's my opinion on the special town meeting. In terms of the date, I think I would rather see us do it earlier. I think that March 7th is so close to annual town meeting. I'd rather see us do it at the beginning of February if we can find a date to do it. I have talked to a lot of families in the community about whether a Saturday is better than a weekday. I think your risk with a weekend is that you get no no representation from a family. I think during the week, you probably get one, hopefully two. So I mean, I don't think there's any good time to have a special town meeting, but that's kind of the feedback that I've gotten from the folks that I've talked to. So that's my 2 cents on the special town meeting and the date. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I look at the roof situation as a 4-letter word. Dire, D-I-R-E, right?
Do you think the roof should be put on the special or the annual?
So I think that, and we haven't met since we met jointly with you. So this is just my thought process, is that we put 1 to 3 options of feasibility and schematic design. If those fail, all of them, then I think we need to have a 4th article for a roof at the special.
But Chelsea, even if they don't fail, we do the study and we pick a project.
Yeah.
You're still talking years before it's actually done. So how do you wait that long to do the roof? Regardless of which project it is.
I think in 2 weeks' time, we'll have a better idea on how much the roof will cost as a standalone project. So I don't know that I can answer that because we just don't know what that number is going to be. And I think if we're talking about a really large sum of money, then I don't know how we can do them both simultaneously.
I have a slightly different view here. I don't think we have a choice on the Neary roof. I think it is, I think, probably the highest capital priority that we have. Regardless of what option we may or may not choose, Neary is going to be a school probably for at least 3 and possibly as many as 4 to 5 years. We can't build anything and complete it, fund, build, design, and work through that process in less than that time frame. So Neary is going to be a school for some period of time. And the question in my mind, and quite honestly, even if Neary isn't a school, it's going to be a municipal building. I don't see the option of tearing it down as realistic. And so I think the roof, and whether it's a 5-year roof or a 30-year roof, I think it's probably going to be a 30-year roof, is the highest priority in the community at the moment. I would actually wait until the fall because I don't think we're ready to actually present a coherent plan in March. I think quite the opposite. I think we will not be doing ourselves any favors by trying to rush that through. So I think that would be an important consideration. There's no demographic pressure that I can see that drives us to have to build something quickly. But
So I agree, there's no demographic pressure, but that's not why we're doing this.
no, I understand. You know,
We don't have we're not solving for an enrollment problem.
no, you're right. We don't have an
I
immediate.
just want to be clear.
Al, do you mean wait until fall for the roof or wait?
No, for the special town meeting.
I'm sorry.
Do you mean wait until the fall for the roof?
No, no.
For the special town meeting?
If you wanted to hold a special town meeting to fund the roof, I would be in favor of that.
So
So the plain fact is, we're probably not going to do anything to the roof before the summer anyway. Just because we've got kids in school. And so funding it at the annual town meeting is probably perfectly reasonable. But
I thought you just said special to fund it.
no, I
Annual.
don't think it makes any difference in terms of, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you're gonna be putting a new roof on with kids in the school.
We do have experience doing that.
Pardon?
We do have experience doing that in another roof project. It's not
Okay.
ideal. Ideally, it would be when, you
But
know,
I think the roof is the clear priority because it's gonna be a school for at least 3 to 5 years. I don't think we have any choice about that matter.
What I was thinking,
It may
I know
not
that
be 3 to 5
Jason
years.
wants to talk here, but I was thinking if there's anyone else, from the whole school committee that wants to comment on this issue, I mean, we can have kind of a free flowing discussion a little bit here, but. Yeah.
Al, I think you lost me. You said we should not have a meeting until the fall. Is that what you said?
Well, I think that, what I've said is that the roof is the priority.
Yeah.
And that is the highest priority. I would wait on the other options until the fall, because I think you've got to get that through town meeting. We're gonna be asking for a lot. Because not only are we going to be asking for a non-trivial sum for the roof, there's at least a reasonable chance that there's going to be a 2.5 override. At least we're in danger of having one. And, how many times do you want to go to the well?
So I think that if you wait till the fall to do the special and put the roof on the annual, one of the questions you're going to get at the annual, assuming, especially if it needs a 2/3 vote, it's debt financed, is, well, what are you going to do about the project? So I think you've got to have made progress by April 11th on what we're going to do to try to solve this problem. But what you said, Chelsea, doesn't make sense to me. I think you got to do the roof, period. No matter what, you've got to get that roof funded. And if we do go forward with the 3 options that Andrew described a minute ago, and we do keep, so if we renovate Neary, right? Hopefully they can find a way to keep the new roof as they do the renovation. So we haven't thrown that money away. If we move 1 grade to Trotter and 1 grade to Fenn, and then as Al said, I guess we keep Neary as a town building, got to spend some money on it, but you still have to put the roof on it to keep it as a town building. If instead you move 4 grades to Fenn, you still keep Neary as a town building, you still put the roof on it. So I don't think we're throwing the money away necessarily if those are the 3 projects we're going to bring forth. So it still seems like, given what we have been told over and over is the dire state of that roof and how long we've been talking about, you're going to have to get that thing funded either at the special town in March or the annual in April, period.
But no matter what you do with the roof, and if we keep it as a municipal building, you still have to deal with the asbestos, the water suppression. We don't have a fire suppression system in that building. We have asbestos. Even if it's a municipal building, all that stuff still has to be done. So I think I agree that we need to know what we're going to do with Neary. Because I would not want to put $5 million on the roof and then say, okay, now what are we going to do? And have to go back to the well to the taxpayers. It's going to be a very difficult fight, I think. If it's a municipal building or it's a school, all these things have to be corrected. It has to become ADA compliant. It has to have asbestos removal. It has to have all the mold taken care of, which is underneath where the leaking has happened. And you have to put in a fire suppression system. It needs new windows and doors, no matter what. So I would like to see us have a package to look at what it's going to take to renovate Neary. And again, I can't keep going back to the town. I think we need a package.
You mean total cost of renovation, everything?
And what we're talking about is to get the money, spend money to find out what that number is.
Right. But I just feel very uncomfortable about spending money on like 3 different proposals. I mean, I think we should try to zero in on one thing. And if the voters decide they don't want to do it, then they have spoken again. But I think we have to put some effort into knowing, and I think we have a little bit of an idea because we did look at a little bit of that when we were on the Neary Building Committee of what it was going to do to renovate that building. And again, renovation either way, because if it's municipal, you still have to correct all the problems.
So I have a lot of thoughts on what's been said. I have a few actual questions that I think will help maybe guide us towards consensus. So first, Greg, you said 2 weeks, you'll have a rough idea, or Kelsey, did you say that?
So right now we have requests for qualifications. We have approximately 15 interested companies. They're doing site visits this week, and then we'll make a determination on who next week. At that point, once they sign the contract and agreement, then they'll start their study. And hopefully within 2 to 3 weeks from that point, we'll have a better sense of an order of magnitude the cost to put the roof.
So
And that's,
mid-January, you would know approximately what it would cost to put a new roof on Neary. So if you take 5 steps back before we go 10 steps forward, we have parents considering sending their kids to school with umbrellas right now. Literally as late as last week with yellow stuff coming through the roof.
We couldn't
Okay.
hear you, Jason. What did you say?
We have parents considering sending their kids to school with umbrellas because we had yellow coming through the roof. Okay, I think we all acknowledge there's an issue with it. Okay, I don't hear anyone saying that. I think there's a few steps we need to pretty much take here as we go forward. I think it's critical that the district work to get that estimate. And then we'll be able to validate all of the claims of whether we have an ADA issue, fire suppression, all of that. But I think what we're missing in terms of any of that, regardless of whether we have to make all the ADA upgrades and fire suppression or not at this point, is if we just put a roof on that building and do a major construction later on, we will be throwing money out the door now to band-aid a situation for a longer term, regardless whether it's a municipal building or a school, because of, like, if you think about just like the HVAC equipment that's going to have to go on that building, regardless of the use, you're going to be drilling into a brand new roof, voiding warranties and 30-year plans. So let's not chase a problem as dire as it is without some thought. Now, I'm also, when you think about September, that's a long time, because we've already been at this since May, and I realized there's a committee that worked incredibly hard over the summer, but they had no access to external consultants that know how to price this work in the public sector. They did a great job. They narrowed down from 12 options, but they had no access to any help, right? And you can only do, and even if they did have people that do that work on the committee, they still had no access to independent third-party personnel. So what I would suggest is kind of a modified path in terms of how we proceed. I think we have to get the estimate on the roof ASAP and reconvene as soon as we know that deadline in terms of whether we advance a roof. I think I would encourage the select board, if we learn that we can do a roof and financially it makes sense, you should not wait till the annual town meeting to call a town meeting and work on that if we think that's the right answer for that building for the next 30 years. You should call a town meeting and get it approved, because from a capital perspective, like Andrew sort of gave as a prelude, you're holding up every other department in this town, and potentially how you decide what decisions you make from an operational perspective in terms of what capital needs are going to take priority. You've got a roof, you've got over 15 million of DPW capital, you've got the fire department, you got the police department doubling the number of cruisers. You've got a lot of things coming that you're gonna have to make some tough decisions on. And then if we look at the school capital, we're talking about one building. There's a lot of needs at Finn. There's some growing needs next door. So you've got a whole parcel you're gonna have to think about in totality. And I don't know how you make educated decisions without kind of knowing where we're going with nearing. Greg, I'm not gonna put you on the spot with this next factual question. It'll be a little more difficult than the roof estimate. Is when we had the Neary Building Committee as late as May, we were promising that we could move students out of Neary for a 2-year time period. Do you still believe, and if you need to come back and not answer this tonight, so do you still believe that that plan could be executed to take students out of that building for a 1 to 2 year time period for any sort of project, whether it be roof, light renovation, or anything like that? Or do you need, is your enrollment changed to a point where you can't do that anymore?
We'd have to revisit the plans, but with adding modulars as that plan included, we think we could move grade levels temporarily, would come at a programmatic cost for a short period of time.
So I think that's just something everyone needs to keep in mind, is we did have a plan if we were going to be building a 4th-grade school and using that same footprint. But I think there's a broader question that the select board needs to answer, and at least I think we know Al's view is something's going to happen on that. Some building will be on that site for municipal purposes in the long term. Like, does the community share that view, right? Because I think the other factor we had as part of this process was concerns around the surrounding environment, right? Which you need to be clear with the community what steps have been taken on that site to alleviate those concerns, or were they just part of a broader concern? Because I don't know that you put any money into a roof, a municipal building, or a school at that site if the community is not comfortable with that site, which then puts pressure on the select board to find an alternative site. Right. So I think those are just some of the things you should be thinking about. But I'll close with kind of some on the timing. I would strongly encourage you, the roof makes sense to do it now, with my cautionary tale around the additional stuff you may do. But you need to set up some group with some feasibility money to keep the process moving, even despite the roof. Because if you're putting a roof in the building, that's gonna solve one need, which is to keep that building and the lights on in a safe environment for the faculty to work. You still have other issues. If you go the non-ADA, non-fire suppression route, you still don't have sprinklers in that building. Your occupancy load is 300 to 400 kids a day plus whatever number of faculty. So you're just putting a Band-Aid on it. So you really, really need to have kind of that continued progress towards what does our elementary school and middle school, so K-8 look like in terms of the buildings we're using, and you need some feasibility funding to do that. Whether you do it as 3 different options or 4 different options, we can talk about all that, but in a budget strapped environment, you can't just be throwing hundreds of thousands at a bunch of different options because one person suggested it. You have to have some community consensus around it sooner rather than later, and I'd strongly encourage you to narrow, but give a choice.
Yeah, so then would it fair to say that does it make sense that the roof has to be done? Okay, and it does make sense to, if you're gonna think about spending the money on the roof, to also think about finding out how much it would cost to just to renovate the entire building all at once, right?
We pretty much know those numbers and they need to be dusted off with a cost estimator. We have those numbers for a 2-grade school. We had to look at it a year ago.
So
Or a
what we
3-grade
had-
school.
So remember, we had 12 options and then 3 options, then 1 option. So the first set of numbers were very were really estimates. Then over the summer, we did have it narrowed down. So we had much better numbers for those 3, which included a new 2-grade school, a totally a new 4th-grade school, and a renovated Neary with 2 grades added to it. That's the 3 numbers we had that were much better than the first round. And then the last round, we had even better option, or better numbers when we had the 4th-grade school. So we do have some pretty good numbers for a new 2-grade school. Or excuse me, we don't have a renovated 2-grade, Jason. That wasn't one of the options. So we've got the new, but we think that the new was going to be less than the renovation anyway. So you got a pretty good number to use there, knowing that the renovation might cost a little bit more.
You have a revised educational plan that the district worked on this summer that I believe had consensus. Someone that was on the committee is going to have to, know that there was a lot of dissent that I heard about that. And you have a baseline for what amount of space, 3 grades or 2 grades or whatever iteration you want to run. It's just a matter of dusting it off and comparing it to where that final 4th grade lived. If the town is invested in that property as a school.
Well, I think we should hear from the advisory committee next, but just one thing, just a follow-up question, where I was going with this is, are you saying that because the Neary Building Committee already got information about how much it costs to do a renovation of Neary, you don't need to have a town meeting warrant article?
You would need something to bring a proposal forward, but you certainly aren't starting from scratch.
So you wouldn't cost as much money, but you need some money.
We didn't have a schematic on that. We had a schematic on the 4th-grade new school. So we had an estimate on the 2-grade school, but it's not a full schematic. So we've got numbers. They're just not as good as what we had for the 4th-grade.
You'd have to go from the design, an architect in the room probably help me, but you have to go from the design to schematic design. It's a very high level. And just a point of order before we go to advisory. There are people raising their hand online that are not members of the community. So can you just every once in a while do a reminder of how we're doing public comment?
Yeah, we're gonna have, we're again, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, we're gonna have a discussion among the boards, and then once we feel that's kind of exhaustive, we'll turn to public comment. So we haven't heard from the advisory committee, Marcy.
So we haven't met as a group, but I have a few questions myself, and I think Howard had his hand up at one point as well. Looks like it's up now. Okay. And others here may have questions too. We had an estimate, I thought, of the roof before the last town meeting warrant was pulled. Was that not accurate, or we're going back to see if we can get a better deal?
We don't have a real estimate. I think we had a report from Vertex done in 2021.
Oh.
But since then, they're just estimates.
All right, good. Okay. I'm making sure I didn't miss something. Okay. I have met with the some school committee members and others. I think the roof is dire. I'm speaking for myself. It would be in favor of moving forward as quickly as possible, as Jason points out.
I just think that it's
Yeah.
sometimes hard to
That's
get.
hard.
Yeah, the roof, if we describe the roof as dire, which Roger did, I think it has to be done sooner rather than later, no matter what path we take. So I would encourage the groups to consider that. The advisory will take that under advisement. And I don't think that it'll be possible, in my personal opinion, to get all of the studies lined up in a matter of weeks, for that to also be on a town meeting warrant in the spring. I mean, it doesn't seem realistic considering we've been waiting for a while now just to get a roof estimate. So how?
It's not the studies, it's the money to fund the studies, is what the warrant
We have
article
to
is.
know what studies we're gonna.
Yeah, we've got to decide on which projects, right, that we want to, we think would be appropriate to bring forward, given the feedback we had. That's right, but we're not gonna study them before the special town meeting. We're gonna try to bring projects we think are palatable, that people wanted, and see if they want to fund the study of that project.
So just
So both should happen simultaneously then, because I think I
So with
heard
the
over here,
roof-
like, if we.
So
maybe we
with the
should hold
roof,
off.
remember we had a placeholder for a warrant article for fall town meeting.
Yeah.
We pulled it.
Right.
And the school committee voted.
Yeah.
To go ahead and take funds to just do feasibility study on the roof
Okay.
only. So that's been in process.
Okay.
So we went out to bid, and correct me if I'm wrong, the bids came back. And now we're going through, so that's the timeline to get to January. So this
Good.
started in September, I think, when we pulled the article and did it on our own.
Okay, thank you. That was one of my biggest questions. I think Howard or others may want to speak to. Howard?
All right, can you all hear me okay? I'm sorry, I'm in a convention center. So the yes? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so I'm still questioning on the roof. If we're getting it seems with the dire that the only option is to 100% replace the roof. I think the town is going to have a very hard time funding the numbers we've been funding for a building that's potentially going to disappear. It's throwing bad money at something. Is there an option of patching and repair to get us through, and or moving students out, as I think Jason said? It's with all the bills we're about to put on the town that we've just mentioned with this new building, et cetera, throwing an extra $2 or $4 million that's going to last 3 years is a very hard sell. So I think we need to come with an option. The options for the roof have been A and a B. That's maybe outside of the 5-year and the 30-year roof option and what the differences are, first of all. Al, I disagree with you 1,000% that building should stay. If we're not going to turn it into a school, with everything that needs to be put into it, it should be demolished. Find something else for the land. That's, again, throwing a huge amount of money at something that I don't think we need, and I think that's what the town has spoken to as well. I agree we should bring multiple options to the town meeting sooner rather than later, so that we know the direction the town wants. It was very clear at the last meeting, the town wants choices. They don't want one option. And again, that unfortunately delays the process even longer, so the sooner we get started, the better.
I just respond to, so we did patch and repair the roof in 2020 to buy another 5 years to move through the process of the core building program with MSBA. We have asked the question, what alternative solutions are there to buy us another 5 years? And with the folks who have assessed the roof, they are saying there are no short-term solutions. However, as part of the feasibility and the work that, the next folks come on board, that will be a question we'll ask, and part of the data that Jason spoke to around, what data do the boards and committees need in order to make an informed decision?
Okay. Obviously, putting our students through leaking roofs is completely unacceptable. That it's gotten this far is shame on us. So I see the urgency, but just on a strictly financial figure to the town, we are going to be asked this town for a huge amount of taxes over the next few years, to the point that some people just simply can't afford to be in town. So we need to justify that. But the town, like I said, has been very clear they want options, and to make the choice themselves. So I think we need to give them what they've asked for, bring them options. As I said, if we're bringing, what we have now, the committee has done some very good work. I think we have enough to bring to the town to get direction of what to study.
If you listen to what everybody said, including Jason, what Howard just said, it looks to me like there's this two paths there. Either we put this roof on, either the special town meeting in February or March, or the annual, so that it's done over the summer, so that when the kids come back in the fall, they've got a new roof. Or Greg comes back and says, yes, we can move those 2 grades to Finn and Woodward with the modulars, which, by the way, was the cost of $2 million, I believe, in total for 2 years.
2 million for.
Yeah, so
4
that's not
months
a
for
cheap,
2 years.
that's not cheap either. That's 7 figures.
And that's rental. So at the end of that, it's after
Okay.
2 years, we don't have the problem completely solved. We have ongoing rental costs of those modulars.
Yep, and we're happy to run those numbers with capital as well. $2 million is not a small amount either, but it's half of 4 million. If that building is going to be demolished, we still save $2 million. And I know if that building be demolished is also a question, but that's why we need studies to find out.
I'm not sure what parents would say if they had the 2 choices of having the kids in school with a new roof in the fall versus going to modulars for 2 years, but
I think it's important to note that the plan to relocate students during construction did have an impact on educational programming. So it's not only the cost of the modulars, but it's also the cost of experiences students wouldn't get as a result.
And I agree, it's less than ideal, and I also agree with the town. We should give the town that choice to make. I think the transparency and bring all factors, but to just ask for a roof without letting them know the rest, and here's the other options, and one of those options is that building may go away, is a little disingenuous too. I think we need to present all options and put everything on the table and not ask for a roof now and surprise it later.
so he's saying put it all in one.
So Howard, but this is Andrew.
Yep.
I agree with providing people options, but I think what that means is, like, if you have someone who is just, I don't like the Neary site, I don't want to spend any money on it, then they have an ability to support something like moving forward with costing out what it would cost to move 2 grades to Finn or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But it's still 3 years, so what do you do with Neary in those 3 years?
No, I get what you're saying, but
I'm saying, but they should have the facts that say if we move children, if we're going to, I don't know, what was the option? Add people to Finn, add people to Trotter, and get rid of Neary. They should know that that's one of the options, because that would play. I know in my mind that would play on my ability to put options for the roof and what to do for those couple of years.
so you didn't really complete the whole discussion.
That's okay. I wanted Howard. to
I'm sorry.
chime in. It's okay. I don't know if others have any comments you want to make.
Larry has a scene.
I'd like to continue down the path that Jason sort of alluded to, and that Howard made concrete, that I think one of the problems we have here is we're trying to make a decision about the roof before we actually make a decision about the building.
Mhm.
And, independent of the cost, I do, we have to worry about what people are going to vote on. And I think there is this sort of psychological issue that if you gave, I'm speaking for myself here now, so, maybe I'm different than others, but if you gave me the choice of spending $2 million on a roof for a building that I'm going to tear down 2 years later, and spending $2 million on some modular classrooms that might have, some impact on education, I'd probably go for the latter. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily logical, but emotionally, I'd have a hard time voting to spend $2 million on the roof for a building that I'm going to tear down. And if we believe that's a reasonable point of view, then I think we need to think seriously about solving the first problem before the second problem. Because if we're going to tear down Neary, and I'm not suggesting that we do or we don't. I don't have enough data to make that statement. But if we believe that the town is not going to have an appetite for having a building on that site for any reason, then we need to try to get to that point first and then decide what we want to do. I mean, obviously, I don't want kids sitting in classrooms where it's raining. But, I think there's a bigger problem that needs to be solved, and we're
But
we're
aren't we,
trying to put a patch on one without actually solving or addressing the bigger issue.
but aren't we anticipating how town meeting will vote? And it's basically, it's town meeting's money and they can vote, keep Neary, don't keep Neary, roof it, don't roof it. It's up to us to bring it forward to them sooner rather than later, please. And see how they vote. I mean, we can't anticipate how the town will vote.
That's true.
It's up to them, but it's up to us to get the roof issue there sooner rather than later because it's unhealthy. You know, I mean, I would say, bring the roof forward now. If the town says no way, then we've heard them. That's their decision. But it's really not up to us to decide. It's up to us to just say, you decide, town. Because it's your money in your school. I mean, that's how I feel about it.
Larry, so if the roof is 4 to 6 million and not 2, that probably even amplifies what you think the choices would be.
Yeah, I was
first.
making it an even 2 million, 2 million, but if the roof is 4 to 6. If the roof is 4 to 6, I mean, and the problem with the last statement is, yes, we could just bring the roof to town meeting and let them vote. But if they do vote no, then we've spent another 3 months going nowhere because we're going to have to now wait another few months to actually get the next alternative on the table. And meanwhile, it's still raining in Erie. So, yeah, it seems to me that somehow we need to come up with some alternatives so that we can make some decision that we're going to go down this path or that path.
Well, let me just offer one of my bad ideas. It sounds to me like the fork in the road that where you're going is that suppose we offered to town meeting in March. We need a roof on Neary. If you vote for a roof on Neary, you're voting to keep Neary as a building for 30 years going forward. If you vote no, then there is the other fork in the road is next year we will be moving students out of Neary and into portable classrooms because you will have effectively voted to abandon Neary if you don't want to put a roof on it. So that's really kind of the first fork in the road is Neary going to be part of our future or not? And if you want Neary to be part of our future, you vote for a roof. If you don't want Neary to be part of our future, then then we have to move kids out of there for the 26-27 school year and into this alternative configuration, which is educationally suboptimal, but is really our only choice. So maybe that's
exactly. And at least come away with an action one way or the other.
Yeah. My only point to that is I think you can vote for the roof in not 30 years. Right. The 30-year point comes in when you have to update the sprinkler system and the asbestos abatement and whatever. You could just put a roof on it for 5 years to get us through the thing. And, I don't think you have to commit to 30 years to put a roof on.
I don't either. I don't think that just because you put a roof, you said Neary's going to be there 30 years. Because let's say you choose a project where you're going to make a 4-grade school at Finn. You're going to pay that. It's going to be a huge cost project. Then you're going to renovate Neary on top of that. The total is going to be more than what the new 4-grade school was going to be to us. So, for those that were against the project because of cost, you've now got a cost that's more. So I don't think you can assume that people are going to think we want to spend all the money on Neary if it ends up not being a school just because you put a $6 million roof on it.
And just to be clear at least from this member on school committee, we haven't talked about this. I would not be in favor of if the roof fails, moving kids into modulars. That's going to totally impact the programming and the student experience for, we don't know how long if we don't have a plan. So I would not be in favor of moving kids to modulars unless it's for construction.
If the roof fails, you have to vote.
Well, then we don't have a choice, right?
You don't have a choice.
But I don't think that we need to come up with a plan and not just, the roof failed, so we're going to just move into modulars. I just don't think that's not where the school committee would agree to.
That's a question. So probably for Jason and Kathy, when you did the work on the 2-grade renovation, what if you renovated it not to be a school, but let's say it was a municipal building, so you didn't have to put the technology or whatever would need to go for school. do you think the cost is substantially different to just renovate it to meet current ADA standards and not making it a school?
We didn't look at it, but
I
we
mean-
think it's a little less, but it's still substantial.
Let me give you a somewhat indirect, and I'm looking at Tim Flynn on this one as well. We looked at that for Finn. And to do it in a nice way, it was like $16 million. And Finn has fire suppression and has a lot more, half that building is modern.
You're
Half of it is
referencing
not.
the community center, exploratory
Yeah,
work?
like to make it offices and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
something
16
other than a school, yeah.
16 million was, I'll call it the higher end version. There were versions of that were 8-ish million, 6
We
million.
went down to 2, I think.
Yeah, but like you could just do a minor coat, like, but Finn again is not a great comparison to
Mary,
Neary because you can't even get like a wheelchair into a bathroom right now in Neary, and you have no fire suppression in that building. That alone it's too complex.
no working kitchen, horrible gym.
All right, but I'm saying a municipality doesn't need a gym or a kitchen. Where I'm going with this is I'm not sure I agree with Howard on that building needs to get demoed. And I think it's very clear the roof something has to get done. And if our school experts committee are saying that modulars aren't an option, I mean, what other options do you have other than to fix the roof?
So Eric, one of the advantages of the new 4th grade school is we're going to get a town building as part of it, right? And we felt Finn was a much better town building than Neary. So that's why you demo Neary instead of Finn. Finn was at least most of it was much newer. And we felt like there was going to be maybe $2 million that had to be spent to get it ready for rec to move in and for some apartments to add portable hall to move in. But to me, Neary is a whole different ballgame as far as getting it ready to be used for other things. And then you still got the issue of the group that doesn't want anything to be built on that site, not a penny to be spent on Neary because they're worried about that landfill. And we don't know how big that group is. I've tried to call people that I knew hated the site. And I said, would you have voted for the project if you weren't there? And they said, yes. It was truly the site, but I don't know how you break those two groups apart as far as who really hates that site.
Andrew Phelps has in it for a
Can you
while.
call on Andrew?
What do you say?
Can you, Andrew?
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Andrew.
Hey, so I mean, I'll give my opinion on the roof. I'm not going to get, I have some comments on the school proposal and what we do there. I would agree with Howard. I think, I mean, we definitely have to do something and we have to do something now. I do think it would be very beneficial to have a long and a short-term option. I know there were different options when we had the Vertex report versus the most recent report in terms of how many layers we had and what kind of roof it was and how long it would last. Ideally, we would have a 5 to 10 year option. I know we've kicked that can down the road, and I know it in talking with Keith, the roof is not in great shape, probably not an option. But if we don't do that, we have to have a very detailed ironclad reason why that it is completely failing and it's soaked through and we need to do it. Yes, right. But I think some of the things that I've heard were kind of like, yeah, but that's not the right way to do it, or yeah, but we want to do a longer term one. It's a better for the long term, more economical over the long run, but the building might not last that long. So I think in terms of that, I think we need that optionality. Hopefully when we get the information back and have the consultants look at it, they can give us that. In terms of the schedule and how we do special or annual town meeting, one of my big concerns on the roof is I believe we should, I'm not sure if we have to, but I believe we definitely should be looking at either a debt exclusion or a general override to pay for it. I don't believe it would be, with where we are and most likely needing an override anyway, approving something prior to a ballot initiative to be able to increase the levy limit to pay for it. And if we're going to not look at not keeping this building for a long period, I would not want to bond it out over a long period. So I'd almost want to be doing the 6 million in cash. So that's my 2 cents on the roof there. I'll hold off on any questions about the schools and the process later.
And the Larry, you had some?
Well, I just wanted to go down the path again that Howard was going down, that we're sort of, there's sort of a tacit opinion here that if Neary is not a school, it could be a municipal building, and therefore the roof is worth doing. But I'm just not convinced that that's really the right choice. It could be that you know, from everything that I've heard about the shape that Neary's in between HVAC and roof and a dozen other things, that the best way to have a municipal building on that site is to renovate with a bulldozer, in which case, you know, the roof won't be doing any good in that situation either. So I really believe that we need to understand whether people are willing to have any kind of facility on that site, number one. Number two is, are they willing to have a school on that site? And number three is, if not, what do we want to do with it? And assuming that we can simply convert that building into something else seems like a stretch to me.
But wouldn't having a vote on the roof answer your question?
With having a vote on the roof, answer my question.
Whether people would think it was worth
If
putting.
people voted yes on the roof, it would answer my question. If people voted no on the roof, then we just kick, without some alternative, we just kick the can down the road for another 3 or 4 months.
So like,
And we've kicked it down the road lots of times already, which is my concern.
so just my perspective on it now, and now this is like the 4th select board meeting in like under 2 or 3 months about this. And you know, you get to the point where there's just fatigue. You feel like you're talking about the same things over and over and over again, and just however it happens, we need to move forward on this. So I feel like I know what my preference is. My own preference is just renovate the area as a school. I know there's a lot of people out there that have site-based concerns about there. I think a lot of them are not very empirically based, but I feel like even if just this spring we get funding to fix the roof, at least something has happened, right? Where we've made some progress. I feel like if you're gonna bring to town meeting a warrant article to fund the roof, you should at least ask people as an alternative, do you want to spend some money to find out how much it would cost to just renovate the whole building? And then I think you could defer work on the roof until maybe the fall. You could have a fall town meeting to vote on actual projects. And if the Neary renovation project got funded in the fall, then you wouldn't be doing the short-term fix on the roof. But I have absolutely no idea how much, you know, as Kathy was saying, people who are really against that as a site, the only way to find out, you know, how many people are dead set against it is to give them the option to support something else. And, you know, the long and short of it is I feel like one of the best options is have this special town meeting with a warrant article to, you know, feasibility and schematic design for the Neary renovation, then have the last article be the roof. So if all the other options fail, you would at least make progress on the roof. And you should have at least one other option so that people who feel like they're never going to support spending money at Neary have something to support. And if town meeting supports that, then we've made some progress there. You know, the whole discussion will help us find out whether, as a town, people want to support, you know, keeping that as a building or not. But I think, I mean, the worst case scenario would be all 4 options fail. When I say 4, like if you had 3 options and then the last was to do the Neary roof. But I feel like if at least one of these options got funded, we would feel like we made some progress. You know, like Larry, to your point about, well, what if, you know, the town doesn't want to support Neary? We just have no idea. But the only way to, you know, make progress is to give people an option. Like, okay, do you want to spend money to find, if you really believe we should, instead of spending money at Neary, you know, moving grades to other schools, here's an option, you know, to spend money to take a forward step on this. We just can't keep talking about it over and over and not, you know, having at least some like one positive step forward.
But Andrew, I still don't see, somebody correct me, how we don't fix this roof no matter what we do. There's no option that's going to happen quick enough to solve the roof.
Okay, and I honestly, I'm not what I just said about if you voted to, the town meeting voted to spend money to cost out the Miri renovation, right?
At the regular town meeting you're talking about, or a special?
On a special town meeting.
Okay.
Then let's say you find out a number by late 2026. Right? So then it would make sense, I think, to defer, to not spend money on the roof while you're also finding out how much it costs to do the entire project. That if you could go forward with a fall town meeting on a near renovation project in the fall, and then the roof replacement would take place as part of that. It would take a year after that or so to actually start to take place, but it would be soon enough. You might be able to do something over the next 2 years.
Roll your calendar forward. Let's say fall town meeting would be the earliest we could approve it, right? And then take a year or so
Yeah,
to
but I'm
design
just trying
it.
to think of what do we do? So what, we need some positive.
We just heard a story of kids coming with umbrellas to that school. How do you not fix that roof this summer? Greg,
Exactly.
Chelsea?
When Kathy and I agree, and it's not often on this particular matter.
Oh, Al, we agree a whole lot of things.
On this matter, I don't see that we have a choice. Are we risking? Yes. Are we risking, demolishing the building in 3 to 5 years? Yes, we are risking that. That was the consequence of the failed vote. It's not free. It never was. So I still don't see that we have a choice. Now, whether we renovate with a bulldozer or whether it becomes a municipal building, that's an interesting question because so I started looking at the demographics and I'm still working through that. And I'm meeting with RLS tomorrow. One thing that became very clear was that if Trotter remains a 3-grade school, our enrollments at Trotter are going to be stable to slightly declining over the next 5 to 10 years. And we have a lot of space in Trotter, which would mean that we could conceivably use some of that space for municipal purpose. And I've talked about this with Greg and Chelsea, that, an obvious thing to do would be to move the rec department in there, which would then allow us to resolve 21 Highland, for example. And to get to Larry's point, it may be, and I think we need to think about this very carefully. It may be that we don't need Neary as a municipal building either. Because municipal government right now is mostly housed and, it's a little on the cozy side, but if we have, some small amount of additional room, the point I'm trying to make here is that maintaining all of these buildings is expensive. And, we've got a long list of nice things that we want. And we've got to be very careful about, not keeping around buildings just because we have them. We made that mistake in Fayetteville Hall for decades. And, I think we're making that mistake in 21 Highlands. And, it may be, that we need to take a very careful look at the municipal needs, see whether in fact there's, using Neary as a viable building is something that actually makes sense versus breaking down the silos a little bit and working with the schools and, at least for the next 10 years, using some of the excess space in Trotter.
I still feel that the parents of children in Neary and the parents of children who will go into Neary should have an opportunity as soon as possible to vote on whether they would support to use their tax money to put a roof on that building as soon as possible.
Even if it's money thrown away, right? I agree.
I just want to make one more comment. Particularly if it's a safety issue,
Yeah.
right? Like if the school committee and parents think it's a safety issue, that's different than nice to have. You have to move with the roof.
Agreed, totally.
Mike Newton has had his hand up for a while.
Yeah, so first I would second Andy Pfaff's point that I have not seen I find it hard to just accept that there's no temporary option for the roof, and I haven't seen like a detailed explanation for why there wouldn't be any option at all there. So I'd love to understand that more. I've been maybe dig into that point. The second point that I haven't heard brought up is that if we do put on a roof right now, there's another question of just how much time does that buy us until something else dire at Neary becomes an issue. My guess is that would be the HVAC system, but that potentially relieves, like if you put a new roof on it now, that potentially relieves like the time pressure to come to the town with a different option that's going to be with a $40+ million price tag, regardless of which one it is. And I think what we're underestimating is regardless of which option they go with, that there's going to be a lot of pushback from the town to fund anything like that. I mean, especially my perspective is sort of broadened a little bit since we've gone through the capital meetings the last couple of months. Because of, as Jason brought up, like how many, different competing needs there are that are going to get layered on top of this. If we put the roof on, now at the full cost of $4 million or whatever it is, that sort of whether we wanted to, whether any of us have an appetite for it or not, that opens up the door to just pushing off the process a little longer, which might relieve some of the pressure on that is coming from these other sources. And I think whether we want it or not, the town might unfortunately have an appetite for that.
So let's make it clear when ADA gets triggered. And Tim, correct me if you think I've got this wrong. So right now, Neary's valued at something like $11-12 million. 30% times 12 is $3.6 million. It's 13. Okay, well, 13 times 3 is 3.9. Okay, same thing. It's probably more likely than not that the cost of the roof is going to be more than that. Now we think the valuation could be pushed up at 1/1/26 to maybe 15 million. So I give you 4.5, but there is at least a reasonable chance that ADA at least is going to get triggered here with this roof, depending on what the cost is. So, and then you got a whole bunch of money you're going to spend to do this. But Andrew, I still think if all we can accomplish is at least list the projects we think should be brought forward to price, we've accomplished that, and maybe wait to see what comes in with the roof and push and see if you do what some of them are saying. Is there truly not a short-term solution that would buy us?
When you say to list the projects we want to price, you mean to have a town meeting? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because I think I'm trying to feel out whether there's consensus on doing that. Yeah, Jason?
So I'm going to throw something forward, and I think everyone reacts. I mean, everyone has been saying March, February. Why are we not talking about January? End of January, you have 7 days to post a special town meeting. Get a temperature of the community. You're all worried about what people think. Call a town meeting. Article 1 is feasibility funding for something at Neary. Renovation, new, something on using that existing footprint. See what the temperature of the town is to spend money to do feasibility at that site. Article 3, come back to Article 2, I know how to count, is the roof. And you'll have a number by mid-January, approximately what that number is. Article 2, and this is a question of whether you put it on there or not, is I think the select board through town administrator and town council need to look at the Finn site and educate the community on what can and cannot be done at that site based on town council's prior opinion to the Neary Building Committee on that being designated parkland and the steps that it would take to unwind that, even if the community overwhelmingly wanted to do something there. I think that's clearly in your purview, and then that would be a decision of whether you do any feasibility at Finn. That will allow you to get a quick temperature and have time to react. If all that fails, you still have another shot at this. What we didn't have in May was there was no additional shots. We went all or nothing based on the MSBA process. We're not talking about anyone dictating the process other than the 2 elected boards that sit here, right? You can call a town meeting, you can educate on educational policy and what the schools need. But if we really want to show a commitment to this community that we think we have a problem, put something forward and let them react.
What was three?
So,
Is that-
Jason,
Three
can I-
is a
so,
roof.
so three is
the
just
roof.
doing the roof.
Yep.
And then, oh, 1 second, Roger, and you would bring forward, if the town votes one. And I think the question I would say is if the town voted one, for whatever cost that feasibility is. I think what we would want to know from the design team, if they chose to go with the same procurement, we already have a procurement process done. Right, so absent having to do a new procurement process. How long it would take them to bring a plan back to the community? I don't think it's that long. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I think we are elongating a process. We have the data if that's the site, but let's figure out if that's the site first that the town wants to invest in related to a school. And then the municipal talk, I think, is great in terms of talking about that as a building and creative theories. But we've been down that road. We have so many other capital needs. We have spots like Mr. Al, I think you and I agree on this one. I think we already have spots in our existing infrastructure to deal with. I'm not going to pick in any department, but like we have spots to move people around and can be creative with how we use our existing buildings. With NERI not being a consideration for this building.
So Jason, if you bring those two forward, right, we have done one that's on the near side, and we are showing people what would know 4th grade school, 2nd grade school, you renovate it. Then we've shown people who don't like near side, well, maybe we can do it again, 4th grade school, right? But the group that we haven't shown anything to is the plan Bs that thought we could move to Trotter and to Fenn. We still, some of us still think you got to at least cost that out to satisfy that group.
I think
one way or the other.
What I would say is we need to be careful of just, I think you need to be
2
phased.
minutes.
You need to, I think you can, if it is if it's the desire of this group to keep things moving, that you have to look at something at Trotter and you think you have a group you need to appease on that, I would do a site analysis only. Right? We understand the district's view on the education and what can be done, but all we heard when we went through this process previously was septic. It's not going to take very long to figure out the septic and the conservation. I would do a much smaller package to authorize there before you go spending money of where parts of a building can go. Just figure out what your conservation restrictions are, what your septic restrictions are, versus on NERI, I'm saying bring a package to the town for renovation or new without disturbing the existing foundation, which seemed to be resolve a lot of the environmental.
So your options in between NERI feasibility and NERI roof are.
I'll outline them again, just so everyone's clear, if you want me to.
No, but where I was going with this, they're not full schematic design for.
Yeah,
So-
number 1 and number 2.
Option
No,
one.
for the other options, like.
Option one, something at the NERI site, we should go to the design team and understand in what duration of time and what they can provide. Not a cost yet. We're about the cost in a second. What can they provide and how long does it take to get to some level of comfort of what the size of a project you're looking at there with a modified program from what was previously proposed to town meeting that got rejected. That's a pretty detailed, whether we call it schematic design or some other architectural term. Let's let them propose options of what you need to actually go to town meeting. Remember on
The
this,
special town meeting with, so get that now and go to special town meeting with that number.
we would go to, no, we wouldn't, don't have any money to do that study now, right? We would be in my hypothetical world in January, Article 1, we would be going to the voters, asking for money to do a detailed study. And put the proper architectural term in there that would allow us to get to a number to bring back to the voters for construction. How long does that take and how much does that cost? I don't know.
And that would be a renovation of NERI?
We can all debate renovation, new, clearly not a new 4th grade school. I think we've
Right.
taken a position as a community on that.
2 grades,
It's a 3 grade footprint right now.
3 grades.
Let's not forget that, right?
point.
So I think there's some optionality there, again, without disturbing the footprint, which was a concern, right, of using that. That I think is Article 1. That will tell you the temperature of the community right there. Article 2, bin site. You, select board, need to decide whether that site is actually viable, not for expansion, but are you gonna actually be able to secure the legislative requirements that town council is advising you to actually expand that building? Right, because we're talking about an expansion, we're not talking about renovating existing footprint.
And if yes, we put that on there.
If you get comfortable that you can achieve that, then you are certainly answering some of the questions that Plan B or others brought up during the process, and you're bringing a choice back. Option 3, I think you would spend less money at Trotter and deal with the conservation and environmental septic items first, and see if the community wants to study that to see if it's even viable to take another step. The community may approve 1, 2, and 3. They approve 1, 2, and 3, then you have an option with 4, whether you keep going with the roof. They approve 1. I think there's debate in this room of whether you keep going with 4 or not, depending on how quickly the town wants to move. But through that process, you're going to figure out how quickly this town wants to move on that or not.
I like that because this is basically a cheaper version of the idea that I came in.
Well, it's the same 3, modified, but Jason, you still have to put a number in that article. That's why I said.
I understand you can do that between now and January, figure out what the numbers.
The architect and say, what would it really take to do
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, I'm going to throw something out there. I do believe we are being a little short-sighted in our discussion here. Now that we've taken a step back with the proposal we had before the 4-grade school, if you look at our school sites, none of them are ideal or even remotely close to being ideal, right? Trotter, you have perennial streams, septic, wetland issues. We've had issues in the past putting the bridge over. You got Woodward, you got topographical issues. The parking's hard. You're sandwiched between Choate and houses. Finn, you have the Chapter 97 restricted land. You're next to the Mass Pike. And then Neary, it's got its poor soil conditions, wetlands. It's downhill from a landfill. Even though I feel it's safe, it's certainly not ideal. I think now that we're talking about putting a roof on Neary and getting a little extra life out of that, we really should be looking at additional land in town that is not currently owned by the town, but may be available to purchase or whatever. But I think it's time to take a step back, not look at these sites as the only sites. I think that is very short-sighted. And as we're looking for a school that's going to last us the next 50 years, I think we should look outside of these 4 parcels to possibly build a 2-grade school.
And if you did that, you'd have a school that would be state of the art and really reflect all the things that went into the 4th-grade school.
And you wouldn't need modulars, and you wouldn't need to move kids out, and you wouldn't be having construction on one of the campuses. But I understand that that is a longer process, and it could involve eminent domain or something. But easy is not always best, and I think it's worth the discussion to see if this is possible. We have some time. It's not an imminent piece. We need to do the roof, yes or yes. But before we move ahead with, another $100 million or $50-60 million school project decision, let's at least check that box, make sure that there isn't a better parcel of land in this town to build a new school that would get us the next 50 years more successfully than trying to build it and shoehorn it into one of these properties.
Again, like the benefit of a longer process is partly, that it would give you a chance to look at things, but it also it relieves some of the pressure on the other capital projects, but it also gives some time for the demographic, the weird barbell demographic imbalance in the town to work its way through. And I think you're going to have a much different profile of public opinion in 5 or especially 10 years than you do now. That it's going to be more easy to sell a big project on.
Well, where are we on the roof?
So, I think we also need to talk about the elephant in the room that we're not talking about. The current program, the proposed new Neary, didn't fail because of lack of options. It failed because it was too expensive. We did the survey. That was the number one reason why it failed. And so part of whatever we place before the voters has to have some effective financial guardrails on it to essentially acknowledge that we got the message. Now, my thought is that whatever options we put before the voters should have wording to the effect that the cost to the net of any state subsidies that we might qualify for should not exceed a certain number. For me, that number is $40 million, but it might be a different number. But I think we can't do, I think use a pejorative term here and you won't like it, but I don't think we can simply start down a process and with a blank check. I think we have to demonstrate that we've got some financial guardrails in this process.
So Andrew, yep, on the Neary site, I was personally against that site. Knowing it's safe today, but I don't know if any testing parameters would change in the future that would make it test out of scope in that need. And having better testing wells, you're gonna have better results. So I also didn't know, what does it mean if it tests poorly? So is it like a radon system and you put it on the property and it goes around the property and vents up and out and it's safe going up higher in the air, not going inside the building? I didn't know what I didn't know about that opportunity. So my point is, we should know in any of the studies that we do, what does that look like? What is a mitigation effort long term if it should ever test poorly and become unsafe in the future? If testing parameters change, what is the financial impact the town has to be ready to take on by keeping a school, especially a school there with students in it all day? So I'm kind of curious from that perspective on the site of the Neary site in particular. What does that mean? And what would that be within these studies?
For the record, to add on to what Andrew just said, there were at least two sites that we looked at on the finance subcommittee that were very close to Neary Charlie, would make it still Campusville, that looked at least superficially ideal, especially one of them. So we were worried about the site. At that point, we were still in the field with all that field that was going to have to be done. So we were worried about the site. And it turned out that, probably the majority was cost, but there still was a big group. I just look at the signs on Parkover Road that were against the project because of the site. So it might be appropriate to go back to looking at a different site where it's good land and takes the Neary site issue off the table. So
Respectfully though, Kathy, I think Al hit it. A new site means a brand new building from the ground up, and we saw the cost of that, and that's what
More expensive.
said no. It's a much more expensive process to do a building from the ground up.
It's not, Howard. It's not. We've got the numbers. The new building was less expensive than the complete renovation. Sorry.
I'm concerned by that. That was with a lot of money put in. I gotta believe adding something to the other two buildings, which is what people ask for compared to a new site. Now, the new site takes away a lot of the uncertainty that you get with renovation, but it was very expensive. And maybe if it's a two grade school instead of a 4, maybe it's less square footage and it's less. I think it's worth exploring, but I think Al hit it that we do have to put some guardrails on the cost of this.
Yeah, and I think, Howard, the other one is if you renovate Neary is a very large 2-grade school, right? There's a lot of extra space in that building. Versus if you built unless you're going to chop off some of it, but if you built a new one, you could probably be more efficient, even if it maybe is a little bit more expensive. Not adding on to the other buildings is a different scope, but just a new standalone too.
I think I made my feeling on Neary pretty so. Look, I think if we have the opportunity to explore it, but I think we're also running out of time.
So, in terms of public comment, I think we've heard from all the different boards here. I think it makes sense to hear public comment before we maybe talk about in more concrete terms what we want to do. So We got a couple people in the back here. Yes, Tim?
Tim Woodland Road. I wanted to make a couple of comments. First is, the site keeps coming up and other questions keep coming up. I think one of the big failures of the previous effort was communication with the public and education of the public that just didn't happen. Right? So you get a question out and maybe you get one expert answer in one place, but the information did not find its way across the community. And that gave us an awful lot of, what ifs and, could it be's, and okay, so that makes people nervous and unhappy. So whatever we decide to do, I think there has to be a major serious effort in figuring out how do we talk to the public before town meeting and avoid sort of, the tribalism of looking for reasons to do or to not to do particular items. The other comment I wanted to make is that I understand the tendency to want to say code compliance and ADA is something to be avoided because of the financial consequences. On the other hand, as someone who, by the way, was working in this field before there was an ADA, I would say that, there is a benefit to ADA compliance, to code compliance. The safety codes were written in blood, most of them. Right? Fire suppression is not a nice to have. It's something you really want to deal with. The upgrades to the electrical codes, they save lives. And so I think, at the margins, maybe you look at the 3-year look backs and the 30% thresholds and all of that. But really, I don't think that you need garlic and crosses and to treat them, like they're the zombies and the vampires that are out here to get you. They really have a purpose, and they shouldn't just be the afterthought or the reason not to do things. All right, thank you. Yeah, Mary?
Mary Tinty, 2 General Henry Knox Road. I'm just gonna say, I'm exhausted. This is exhausting. We have been talking about this. You all have been talking about this for years, specifically with the choices that lie in front of us right now. We've been talking about this for months. We are no further along, and that is exhausting, and it is dejecting to every parent in this town who is trying to figure out where and how these kids are going to go to school safely with the education that we promised them for the next couple of years. I have a 3rd grader. We are going in circles about the roof, about portables with no plan. Where is she gonna go? I still don't have answers to this, but for the fact that we keep going in circles, talking about how we don't know what the town wants, how expensive it's all gonna be, how nobody wants to build at Neary. We need answers, and we keep dancing around how we're going to get them. There is a plan put forward now to get those answers from our fellow citizens, from our community. Let's go to town meeting. Let's put the options that people asked for out there. Let's listen to our school committee about what they recommend for the prioritization of those options. And let's try to make some headway together. We really are all in this together. It's going to cost a lot of money. Maybe it doesn't have to cost all the money, but it's going to cost something. I am here as a desperate parent who wanted that 4-grade school. We are not going to get it. I am trying to compromise and move forward in every possible way. What I don't hear is others sort of doing the same thing on the other end, right? So put those 3 options out there. Let's see how we can move forward. And the circular talk is just not going to get us anywhere. So I thank you for all of your efforts, but But there are some things that we can really listen to here and we can stop getting bogged down. There is a path forward and several of them were laid out tonight. Thank you.
Tim?
Mary, just a quick question. You've been involved in all this. How do you feel about the roof now as the fourth option on that article? Do you think the roof is something we should bring forward now, or how do you feel about that?
You know, I have to say, I'm conflicted about it. I'm confused about it tonight. I want to speak honestly and earnestly, and coming into this meeting after having listened to the last several, and I think this is where I've now landed again, is I really want to take this to town meeting sooner rather than later with 3 options for potential plans for our schools. If we have a plan in place that we're going to pursue with feasibility studies, I will then be more comfortable understanding the sacrifices that we have to make for a roof. I would fund it all. I voted for that 4th grade school. I want a working roof for our kids, and I want them to have a safe place to go to school. And so I personally, I hate where we are. I hate where we've stuck ourselves. I want our kids to have a roof. I want our kids to have a place to go to school. I don't want to dilly-dally and figure out what's going to happen after that. And if it's up to, it kills me to have to invest in that roof and then tear Neary down. But I think we all have the Stockholm syndrome about Neary. It is not a good building. It is outdated and we need to get out of there. Why are we repurposing it for a municipal building if we're not doing a complete overhaul on a school there, which is likely going to come across to be the most cost-effective option out of all of these? So I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, I want my daughter to go to school in a building with a working roof that's not going to blow off. And I don't want to not have a plan for when it does. So, you know, if I was ready for her to get squished back at Woodward in portable classrooms, when there was a goal for the whole town to work towards for a 4th grade building that, by the way, she was never going to step foot in academically. That's a sacrifice I was going to make. It's harder to make that sacrifice without knowing what the greater good for our school buildings is going to be. So that's where I land. Thank you.
All right, so was there one other person?
online.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have to introduce them. I have 2 now, so it just says Ashley, so I'm gonna go to Ashley now. Ashley, you should be able to unmute.
Hi guys, sorry. Ashley Kerwin, 14 Pine Hill Road. I'm also the Neary SOS co-chair. So I am in the current building. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm actually in the building a lot currently, and we need a new roof. And it doesn't matter that my son was one of the ones that had the yellow water leak on him or whatever. But we need a new roof, we need a new building, and renovating and not just rebuilding a 2-building school, in my mind, is a waste of money, but it has to be spent. Because at this point in time, it's offensive that we're willing to put our kids in this type of environment, that we are trying to foster a great education with. We're trying to foster that type of environment and telling them that you can do all these things while having rainwater drip on them and the teachers. And the teachers are sitting there saying, we're doing the best we can. And so in my mind, we do need to have a new roof. And if that means we put a new roof on it, and then 2 years from now, we finally come to a conclusion that we have a new building coming to us, fine, burn it down. Because it should have never come to this in the first place. That's my honest opinion. Sorry, I get really worked up over it because I see the conditions every day. I'm in the building every day as a volunteer. I'm not paid to be there. And it's very, very frustrating to hear that we are considering putting a new roof on a building through government officials and the municipalities, but we're not considering our kids. And that is the most disturbing part about all of this. Thank you.
Thanks. I got two more now.
Okay.
Kate Moran.
Okay. Will you bring them over?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Kate Haranis. I'm at 9 Overlook Drive. I am also, as were the last two commenters, a mom of kids who are currently at Finn and Woodward, but sort of squarely in this age bracket. And I would say, firstly, I would second everything that I just heard Mary and Ashley say, but specifically to this moment in time, I would just sort of put two requests very squarely, on or back on the table. One is, as Mary said, and as was raised at the beginning of this meeting, I think to move as swiftly as is possible to a town meeting with separate warrants for each of the options for feasibility that are, the three kind of top options, unequivocally in my mind, making sure that those are options with which the school committee is aligned. But to put those forward so that the town can vote is essential. And if the fourth, warrant needs to be regarding the roof, and we can sequence those in an order so that, imperfect as it may be, we have at least some information and then we can make a decision about the roof. I think, again, to echo other voices in the conversation, we're all making sacrifices and we're all facing decisions that feel in some ways a little bit wasteful. And I think no matter where we land, we're all going to feel that way. I would also ask deeply from my heart that committee members across the board stop throwing out numbers offhand as placeholders for things when they aren't backed by other evidence or data or substantiation. I don't know that you all fully appreciate how easy it is for people on the outside to sometimes grab onto those numbers, assume that there's deep substantiation behind them, even if you didn't mean them, even if you phrased it in the moment as something off the cuff. But whether we're talking about guardrails, whether we're talking about what we're estimating, if it's not backed by something, I would just ask, if you don't know a real number, please don't say it, because it really adds to the confusion. And I know that you're all working so hard to minimize it. A lot of us in the community are working hard to do our part to educate our neighbors and ourselves. And so the off the cuff guesses and my gut says X number really make that difficult. And I would just ask that everyone be mindful of that as we continue the public conversations.
Hey, this is Andrew Dennington. Just a follow-up question for you. How do you feel about the date of a special town meeting where we have presumptively selected a Saturday, first Saturday in March? What's your view, and what do you think is the view of other, your friends about a weekend or a weeknight?
Yeah, I mean, I think my take is probably echoes what Chelsea shared earlier. Like there's no great time slot. I think, for families where one or both parents work, my hunch is that, maybe a weeknight is a little bit easier, but I think the bigger factor is doing all we can to choose the date as quickly as possible and publicize the date itself and what we're going to do in that meeting to make it as accessible as we can for families, which I think happened, despite best efforts, a little bit late in the game in May. I think we could tie ourselves in knots arguing for a weeknight over a Saturday. And what's more important is just like trying to put measures in place, whether it's an overflow room where folks can have their kids or what have you, that accommodate for it. Not a great answer, but my honest one. Sorry. If I get a crystal ball, I'll give you a better one.
That there's not really a great answer to this. Okay. All right. Is there one other person?
Yeah, I think it's Tom Gittens.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, it's Tom Gittens from 73 Flag Road. My kids graduated from the schools many years ago. They went through all the construction at Finn and Woodward and Neary and they're out of it, so they're not going to be involved in any of this. I want to agree with the people who say put a roof on the building now. It's embarrassing to hear the way you all are describing the conditions at Neary, and we got a lot of buildings, we got a lot of property, we got a golf course. To have it raining on our kids in the schools is just inappropriate. So get the roof on it as quick as you can. Kathy Cook talked about it's going to take 3 years to build a new building if we decide to do that, which I'm okay with building more buildings too. We voted to do that before. But a new roof or a fixed roof, whichever is most expedient, it seems like an urgent need to me. Thank you. And thanks for all the hard work.
All right, thanks. Okay, so we've had a long discussion, not a long discussion here of 97 minutes.
You have one more hand go up.
Okay, yeah.
Do you want to take it or no?
Yeah.
Looks like it's back up. Becca, you should be good.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
We can hear you.
You're good, Tal?
We did. Yeah.
I don't know what happened there. We could hear you.
Hello, what about now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, just one quick point that I wanted to make before we wrap up the public comment. Sorry, 48 Oregon.
Becca, can you identify yourself and your address?
Yes, sorry, 48 Oregon Road. Rebecca Denty. Just the last comment I wanted to make is that I think a lot of us parents, and if this isn't obvious, I just wanted to be very explicit about this, is that a lot of us parents are struggling with the fact that you are asking us to sink money and vote for a school to put money on the roof. I know we need a new roof, but I think a lot of us are fearful that if we do this, the town will then use this as an excuse to keep Neary open in longer than it should be. And so I just wanted that to be said out loud without any subcontext, without sort of speaking around the point. But I think a lot of us, myself included, are very nervous about voting to spend money on a roof, knowing that there are people in this town who will then use that as an excuse to continue the lifehood of Neary as it is, with just doing the roof and without doing anything else, and further pushing this down the road. And so I just want to be very explicit about, I'm not comfortable voting for a new roof right now. And that makes me sick to my stomach, because it also is unacceptable that our children, the children in this town, are stuck in a building where they're getting rained on and they don't have adequate heating. And it's embarrassing. And at the same time, I can't in good conscience vote to put money into that building knowing how it will be held over our heads. And that's all I have to say.
All right, thanks. I mean, I know my own just quick reaction to that would be, if the first article is to ask for money for feasibility and schematic design for a new Neary, then that's something that you can support. Even if you didn't, if the way you felt, you didn't want to support putting on a new roof.
You have a hand in back, you have another hand online.
Hi,
Yes.
Cindy Lindstrom, 104 Marlborough Road. I just have a quick question about the roof. It sounds like, the roof is one thing, and then other things might come down the road if there is a plan. But when we do the roof, because it sounds like there's a lot of leaks, there's probably mold. Is mold mitigation included in the new roof plan? Is that something that you can talk to now or not? That's just my question.
So I think the firms that we would contract with would do a full assessment and speak to any mitigation efforts that are needed.
But Greg, they're not quoting anything right now, right? So the numbers you get back are just gonna be the.
Yeah, so right now we have a request for quotes or qualifications, and then next week we'll have hopefully a firm who will begin its work.
Yeah, Eric?
So I'll make this real quick, because I agree, we've been at this multiple times. I think Jason put together a very specific thing you can do. The only thing I would modify in it is I think I'd rather learn more than less about the other options sooner than later, because I think it will inform the town's decision making. Because I think one thing this goes back to the work we did over the summer. We don't know the costs, right? And that's a huge component, clearly, other than the educational considerations. I would just ask, let's do more than less when you put these warrants. Because if it's a few $100,000 extra to get the answer, that's probably the best money we're going to spend, because say we'll just do sooner than later. But I think he's laid out a very clear, distinct path that will allow us to make progress. You're clearly hearing frustration on the lack of progress. And the reality is this is probably the most practical thing we can do, is just to get the answers and figure out if the roof is going to get funded or not. That's just my viewpoint.
So I like Eric's idea, and if we ever get to make a motion tonight, I think the way I would phrase it is I think I have a new option one, which would be to study all three and come up with a number all in one. And then if that fails, you go to articles 2, 3, and 4, which would be just really separately. And then option 5 would be the roof, would be how I'd phrase it.
All right, so.
Andrew.
Yeah.
I have a question. One of the other things that was on the dire needs list, I don't know if dire is the right word in this category, but the necessity of speed was the asbestos abatement for a couple of spaces, right? Where does that fall? And would that hit this special town meeting as an additional funding, or would that hit the annual town meeting to fund that?
So our estimates from our Ahara inspector, 2 rooms and 2 projects wouldn't exceed $50,000.
Okay. So that probably wouldn't factor into the 30%, but it would have to be considered if that was something we were looking at strongly for the roof number when it does come back.
So the extent of the asbestos.
So there are 2. So the Ahara inspection, which takes place every 3 years, identified 2 spaces that need remediation. One is a music room, and the other is actually an old boiler, a water tank in the back room that need to be mitigated sooner than later. That total cost is $50,000. It only addresses those 2 issues. All of the other asbestos containing material in the building is encapsulated. And unless we touch it and expose it, it would need to be remediated. But those are the 2 pressing issues.
And do we need to fund that at this special town meeting, or would that come at the annual town meeting? When would that funding need to happen?
I believe it's on capital warrant article for the capital plan that we discussed with CIPC.
So that doesn't necessarily have to be part of this whole discussion.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it didn't need to be included in this today. So I just want to make sure I understood.
We'll see that in January when we talk to capital.
Okay.
So one more online. What do you want to do?
All right.
Can we
okay.
cut this off?
All right. Well, okay. This is going to be the last one. All right.
Laura Vaughn.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. I just had a quick question. Yes, Laura Vaughn, 198 Woodland Road. Just to follow up on Becca's point, as much as we know the school needs a new roof, I think the question definitely will come up for people who are saying, I don't support that. What's the plan? So if I don't vote for the new roof, what happens then? And I think there has to be a plan. Because if there's not, I mean, obviously it's not an option to leave children in a school where they're getting rained on. So if the town says, no, we don't want to put the new roof on, what happens then? And I really think there needs to be an answer to that, because that's going to be a question.
Okay, thanks. All right, so then ultimately, right, it's select board, our authority call on whether to hold the special town meeting, what articles to put on the warrant, right? So I was thinking it makes sense maybe just again, we'll go down the five of us and just how we feel. So Tim, how do you feel?
I think Jason's last comment was the way that I feel the most strongly about it right now. Article 1 would be all three options together, the feasibility of the three that we've been discussing, which I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet for the summer work. Option B2, which is to try to your fifth grade, the Neary full renovation, and then the Finn expansion with the 2 grades, adding the 2 extra grades that I would want those 3 articles, which is what we've been discussing.
B2 also includes an addition at Finn though, too.
Yes, in addition to both schools.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just make sure
Yep.
it's two projects
Yeah,
at the same time.
two schools would be under or have additions added to them, and it would be part of the study would be how do you do that? So that would be part of it. So I think Article 1 would be all 3 together. Articles 2, 3, and 4 would be them independently. And then that number would probably be higher independently because you'd have an economy of scale to do them together, which is why I think Article 1 would be they're together. And then the last one would be the roof.
Yes, Al.
If we're gonna go down that road, I would propose that I'm not crazy about the idea of lumping them all together. I think they ought to be individually a la carte. 2 items that come up, Andrew Pfaff actually brings up an important point about how you finance them, but I think there is a strong case to be made that they should be financed via borrowing so that any article that passes gets 2/3. Because at the end of the day, 2/3 is the number you need. You might even consider having them be a borrowing outside of the cap, which would then require 2/3 and a vote at the ballot. What that does is it assures that, you've at least got some reasonable chance of getting that support when you actually go and ask for the full amount. And it would also probably weed out a couple of options. I feel quite strongly that we actually do need to put those financial guardrails in terms of, a number that's not to exceed. If for some reason an option can't be met for that, then I think you go back to the town meeting and say, we can't do it for this. Do you still want us to proceed? The prior proposal failed because of the price tag. And so I think we need to think seriously about that. But that's my 2 cents.
All right, so when you think seriously, one of the things you could do is if you're talking about a warrant article that would ask town meeting for a feasibility study for a improvement that ultimately would cost no more than X, something like that.
Or that the net cost, if we can get any form of state subsidy, the net cost to the town would be no more than X.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do is avoid turning our coffers over to the tender mercies of architects.
All right. So I feel I think I'm in the same position as him, and I like the last structure iteration you threw out there. Jason, I think we need to work on the kind of fine tuning the language of it and all that, but just one comment I'd have about this. We decide to go down this route, then we just bear in mind the town meeting will be a little bit strange, right? Because traditionally the select board puts an article on the warrant. This is one thing. This is the best thing that we should do. This is the best option. This is the only option. We support it. This would be a little bit different, where we're presenting a couple different options for people to study. The debate around it, the format of the debate at town meeting may be kind of different. We just have to be patient with it. But I think it makes sense. All right, Marguerite.
I am fine with that if that's what people want to do, but I think it's really time to stop having meetings about it and just get a town meeting going as fast as we can. If we can do it in January, I'm for that.
So, both you and Tim said what Jason, that's not what Jason said about Trotter. He said, limit the scope of what we do there because several of us believe you can't add another grade there because the septic system is already
No,
had a big
I understand that.
exception. So just focus on whether you really could add a grade to Trotter. If you get Finn, just do that small piece of it. I don't see the point of putting all three on one and then doing separately. I think you just do them separately. I don't think there's any advantage to doing that. And then somebody doesn't like one, then you're going to go to the two. So I think we should just 1, 2, and 3. I don't think there should be a cap on the cost because the Neary Building Committee that spent so much time looking at cost and knows about this cost knows how hard we worked to get the cost down. We ended up with the MSBA saying this was the most efficient project they'd seen in a long, long time. We cut every square foot of that we could. So we had architects that did work with us. So it wasn't architects going crazy. We didn't let them go crazy. Since then, we've seen other schools come in with the same amount of students and cost much more. So the costs just keep going up and up and up and up. So to put an arbitrary cap on it when we don't know what that cap should be, when these costs are so much, I think is fruitless. We're just going to end up going back to the drawing board. So I don't think you should put a cap. Please coming with the numbers and then see where we are. So overall, I do think we're heading in the right direction with the three projects, but limiting the Trotter one just to the feasibility of the site because there is clearly a septic problem there. And if you can't get past that, then that one's off the table, I think. So why study Finn if you can't do that one? So modified. But
So the feasibility of the site, but not a full.
yeah,
design.
exactly what Jason said. Just look at whether you really could put another grade there because of the infrastructure which we believe are there.
What's the specificity difference between feasibility and schematic design? What's the technical difference between what you get with one and not get with the other one? Because that will help, I think.
Schematic design, you'd be able to price out what a full construction is. Feasibility is lesser, right? You're just studying certain aspects and you'd have to pick and choose. We didn't have an option on what we studied with the MSBA. Here, the town would have great optionality in terms of what we would want to do. The one thing go ahead.
How do you get the money? Where do we get the price of what this is? Feasibility doesn't get us a number, right? Schematic design.
I could be incorrect, but I believe in this building, we actually did it before schematic design.
As long as we get a number from this and it's a clear answer, I could go either way then on how far we go. I just want a clear answer on what will this cost and is it possible? And if you need to go to schematic design for it, then I would feel strongly about doing that.
I think you have to. You go to schematic and you got estimators that do this for every school project in the state. There's 2 or 3 of them, and they know what the costs are. That's what we did for the 4 buildings. So we felt pretty comfortable that we had a cost that really was in the range of what it was going to cost in the end.
But if Trotter is unbuildable because of the septic and the conservation, why bother with the rest of it?
Well,
You
so,
wouldn't.
I mean,
You wouldn't. So you stop there with
He's
that
saying
one.
he wants it anyway.
well, let me ask, I'll throw this out as a thought because I think it also speaks to the point around Article 97 and Finn. I think it's helpful to know that if you had to replace the whole septic, it may add 20 million to the cost, which clearly puts it out of range. Right. So I think it's worth, we're not spending millions of dollars for these studies. I think one question is how much they cost, but I think it's hugely helpful, at least from my perspective, to know whether Article 97, does that add 10 or 20 million to the cost? If there's a new septic, what does that mean? And so that will certainly filter from a total all cost in. So that way people aren't asking, well, okay, the septic, yes, but then you have to spend the extra money, which will naturally put that option out of range. So Kathy, I take your point, but to me, I think knowing as much as possible, assuming it doesn't cost us a huge amount of money to get that answer, because it will naturally filter that option out.
Okay, so I hear you. I've just been told that it's not so much replace a septic, you can't even do that. It is been perk. So the state's already waived the normal septic capacity a lot with what's there right now to 40 gallons a day down to 8. That's how much exception we already have with what's there.
20 to 8.
It's what?
20 to 8.
28. So it's already, there's a big exception with what we've got right there. So
you
I
couldn't
just don't
even
know
build
that
on
you
it
can.
theoretically, period. Is that what you're getting at?
But that's not obviously my area. So
Yeah.
So I think the way you bridge this gap and the reason I modified after Eric's comment is you have to have whoever's going to oversee this, like that's the elected boards again, right? you have to give them some flexibility to like hear what's happening, right? Like if 20 to 8 is a non-starter, I don't know honestly what that even means. It doesn't sound like a good answer, but right, like let they educate. But if you get to a point where it's just like absolutely stop, if we cannot conceivably bring something forward to the town, don't go keep wasting money because you have it in a scope. That's why you package things together. Or this is, I agree with your commentary, Andrew, the wording needs to give some flexibility so that you can adapt to what you're learning to keep this thing moving, as opposed to we can only spend X amount on this site and we can't spend any more without coming back to town meeting. We need to like empower a group to bring it forward.
Yeah, Roger?
So just so I'm clearly understanding, if you have 3 articles, whatever you do with the third one about, you'll do. The town can vote yes on any or all of those 3 articles, correct? And then the fourth one potentially is that's what, at least that's what, where the discussion is at this point.
And you can study up to 3.
Understood, okay. Because that really kind of obviates the need for one article to do all 3. They can do all 3 by voting separately.
Yeah, so I think Kathy made a good point. I mean, first off, is there anyone here that would support that first one? You want to study all of them?
I would.
You would?
I would.
Okay.
Because I kind of think that to get 2/3 majority, you might need to have another option that's known just to get the support at the end of the day. So I think regardless, I think, there's one less favorable option that we're starting out with within this room anyway. And I think that option though has a strong cohort in town that we need a clear answer. And I think in order for us to move forward as a town, we need a clear answer on that one. And then that will tell us whether or not it seems appealing as the way it sounded appealing before.
Well, the only reason I say just go one at a time is why get stuck in a debate on the first 3 where some people like 1 and 2, some people like 1 and 3. Why not just bring them forth one at a time and see what people want? So it seems like you fake time just to do one at a time.
So let me jump in quickly there, Kathy. I think that the only way to debate this is all 3 at a time. So whether you do it at 3 separate articles or the first one for all 3, at the end of the day, I guess we're going to have to ask the moderator to discuss all 3 at once if that's allowed. And if not, then we should have one, because I think you can't discuss one without the other.
No, I agree. I think there's a way to move to combine articles for discussion.
Yes. So I like the idea of having them separate, because the 2/3 vote would be pretty definitive if it'll move forward. I think Al had a good point there if it's wasting time, but the discussion for all 3 at minimum, I believe, needs to be together. And I know that's going to get messy, but at least that, and then break it out afterwards. But at some point you have to discuss, you have to start, whether there's a presentation or not, but the discussion needs to be all of them together, and then somehow break it out into individuals, or do it with the one.
I'd like to suggest that, having thought about this for a while, I think a Saturday meeting is the one that's going to be necessary. This is not going to be a short meeting. There's going to be.
I agree. It's not going to be a short meeting. Just as we've been talking about this for months, it's not going to be a short meeting. It's a very passionate subject, and it's going to be a very packed room, and I would suggest probably the high school.
I think that leads us closer to Saturday than to a weekday.
I feel like we don't have to.
We can do that at our next meeting.
We'll do that at our next meeting. This issue is so multifaceted, just like one.
So I did survey the Dolmens Club, and they actually wanted the Monday night. I was extremely surprised.
So we have an agenda.
So then, all right, are we ready where we want to? Well, one of the things we could do is we could just take a vote of the select board about, we could just have a motion to support this as a warrant article, and then or a structure for different warrant articles, and then at our next meeting we go and kind of
flesh it out.
Refine it. All right. So, Tim, do you want to make motion?
I mean, I still would like to see all 3, so I'm happy to make a motion, but I don't know if that's how the board would want to do it. So if I will, I'll make a motion that we proceed with a special town meeting, or with the idea that at a special town meeting, we'll have Article 1 or an article, which would be all three options we've discussed. And we would have each option separated out with the school, with the roof, the Neary roof as the final article.
All right, so then one nuance that we just gotta decide, right, is one option is Neary feasibility and schematic design. That's you spend the money to get a number that you could take to a town meeting. And then on the thin and the Neary, the different options we're hearing, right, are you want to have a full feasibility and schematic design for both of those, or we could just say, you're right, Finn and Trotter, or just we can just say feasibility, right, and then work on the issue that
You can say if needed, if you get past
Yeah.
the infrastructure problems, like trucking.
and then the fourth is just the Neary roof, right?
Yeah.
What about the chapter 97?
Okay, so
Yeah. If you get past Trotter, you gotta get past that.
I know.
But look, to be clear, you can't, that's my point, you can get over it. Anything in life is about money.
Right,
That's
that's
my
what I'm
point.
saying.
So it may naturally, that's why I say spend the money for the feasibility, which again, if it's not millions of dollars to go from to get an answer, it may naturally put that in a ballpark cost that just doesn't make any sense.
But you may not have to spend all the money that you have in the article to get to that point. Because if you know that it's gonna
Well, I
cost.
mean, I've talked to folks that
right?
say it's doable, right? Of just, to me, knowing more is helpful than knowing less. And if we're talking a few $100,000, we've spent money. And I keep joking about the 120,000 we spent on a railing for our downtown. This will probably be some of the best money we will ever spend to answer a lot of questions that a lot of people have. I'm not trying to argue.
I'm not arguing with you. I just don't want them to forget about that.
Well,
So-
yeah, and that's not
clearly, that would be part of
the job to
it.
determine that either. So we're gonna have to probably do that ourselves.
Right.
And feed that to the
Right,
architect.
but all of it, but the saying is, I agree with you, and that came up during analysis, it naturally may affect the cost, which is an important point to know, because again, it may put those other options just from a cost perspective, and I get your view on education and what your choice is. But the voters will say, look, those things are 3 times the cost of a Neary renovation.
So I'm
there
gonna
you
try
go.
to maybe rephrase your motion.
Can I-
Okay, so then.
Before you do that, can I just make a suggestion?
Well, I was gonna ask you a question.
All right,
Might
go
okay.
ahead.
So I'm just putting like as a bullet points for a form of a motion, so Neary feasibility and schematic design. Then feasibility, Article 97 and septic. Third, Trotter. The septic. Or,
I guess let me go to my suggestions because it
Okay.
may, I think even you all can make whatever motions you want. My suggestion watching this is, I think there's in at risk of having to talk about this again. I think there is some clear language that we should be consulting with an expert over the next 7 days. When's your next meeting?
Next Tuesday.
8 days from now. In 8 days, I firmly believe we could get the right language for you all to react to and take a motion on.
oh, I agree, but I'm just thinking for tonight's purposes. I think it would be nice if we had a motion where we're.
Keep the 30,000 foot. though.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you're trying to get into
All right.
feasibility, not feasibility, schematic design. like-
So then let me make it.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion for the select board to support 3 options at an upcoming special town meeting. To be flushed, or to be further refined, and a new roof for Neary. At that meeting.
That's general enough for us to work on. Okay, second. All right, so all those in favor? Opposed? All right. Good pass?
Can you take a position on timing of the town meeting?
Well, then we have to have a talk about the date too, right?
Just the general, I think it's important for those that are here tonight to have a general sense of, are you still in
So
March
I-
or February or are you moving up to
I'll
January?
make a motion. I make a motion that we support a March 7th special town meeting unless the data from the school on on Greg from the school would dictate an earlier time. For the roof, sorry, the data on the roof.
We've already said March 7th. Let's just talk about it at the next meeting and, January's iffy because of the weather, but the sooner the better, right? So let's talk about it on the 8th. The sooner the better.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to take a vote on it, but I think your suggestion is just, look, I thought Al makes a very good point. You listen to this, this is not something where if you have weeknight meetings where even if you begin at 6, things don't actually begin until 6:30 because people are coming into the room, etc. This is a difficult debate and it'll be one of the most unusual ones.
But it's only for study money. I mean, it's not even that, I mean, it's a lot of money, but it's not like millions of dollars. It's.
How about just for what? Do you think
The smaller the sum, the greater the
Yeah.
stakes.
Oh, no, don't have that be true.
No, and by the way, this is about millions of dollars
Mary? Yeah.
in the
I
end.
was just gonna offer that we also have the benefit of all being in this all the time. Me, just as an observer, you guys doing all the work. There are whole swaths of people who came to the last meeting who haven't even dialed into this again and are likely only gonna do that at the next meeting. And I have a feeling you're gonna get a lot of people trying to debate things that they don't understand yet and try to get clarity from everyone. So I do think it'll
So I
probably
think
be
that's also where
I think a lot of the Plan B people are going to have a lot of questions.
So I think that's also where realistically about like January, I don't see how that's feasible, have a meeting in January where you do need to get the word out about it. Right? And
And
that
try to
takes
have some
effort and
public
time.
forums to go over
Yeah.
time.
But you need to align on a date and who's owning the public education, because if you go back to Tim's public comment.
Yeah.
Right, like you have no building committee in place right now, so you have a bunch of interested groups here, but who is driving that ship?
Something we can talk about at our next meeting.
Yep.
But hopefully all these different boards will support us. And I still think there's going to be a role here for public forums. Even if they may be kind of lightly attended, they're just opportunities to get the word out. Because we're going to need to do that.
Andrew, just keep in mind, right? If this dollar amount for either the roof or the feasibility study is significant enough, we may need to wait till May to do a override or a debt exclusion from the election, right? So we could do it in January, but it might be contingent upon a May.
Okay. So I think we accomplished something tonight, right? We did.
Nobody said it'd be easy.
Okay.
That was like a Santa Claus.
I feel like our discussion has come to a conclusion. Do you agree? All right. I move that the select board adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
I move school committee adjourned at 39.
Second.
All in favor?
Should have.
I'm gonna move that CIPC adjourn.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Mike N.
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
and I as well.
I move that advisory adjourns. Roll call vote, Andrew,
Aye.
Howard,
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Marcy, that.
Oh, yeah. So there. We did it. Well, no one ran from the room.